My name is Dr. Rachel Bolton-King. I'm an Associate Professor of Forensic Science at Staffordshire University, and I work within the Criminal Justice and the Forensic Science department there. So the research I undertake is quite broad-ranging. My area of specialism is in firearms and ballistics. So what this means is identifying which firearm might have fired a bullet or a cartridge case that's found at a crime scene, and also the imaging aspects of that. So taking that piece of evidence and then imaging it, putting it into a database, comparing it to other samples from firearms that we know. But also that involves sort of shooting incident reconstruction and looking at a crime scene in a broader context and trying to provide the police with information about that crime scene, such as how far away the shooter might have been standing, anything sort of associated with providing them with intelligence and information that they can then further their investigation with. Or it might be looking at a terminal site that has been shot at and then interpreting that information to again provide sort of information and intelligence to that investigating team. I got into firearms and ballistics through doing an undergraduate degree. So I did this at Nottingham Trent University and I studied forensic science, which had a big area of analytical chemistry. But then I had an opportunity to undertake a PhD in firearm identification and imaging, so primarily three-dimensional imaging. And from that, I then got into academia. I had a passion to teach, but also to continue researching. And one of my key drivers is around that link between academic research, but also advancing practice. So trying to support practitioners, not only in a forensic domain, but in other contexts as well within the criminal justice system, around how to improve practice, how to make practice more effective or more efficient, or trying to share and communicate knowledge between academia and industry, in this case, obviously law enforcement or forensic science providers, things like that. Because firearms and ballistics has a wide application, some of my colleagues are archaeologists and forensic archaeologists, and one of them, Professor Caroline Sturdy-Coles, and her husband, Kevin Coles, they undertake research that's focused on Holocaust and the occupation period. As part of my role within the university, I work with the Centre of Archaeology, and some of that work involves going out to those sites that have been involved in the Holocaust. So, for example, on Alderney. And we were undertaking some research into sort of documenting those sites and the individuals that might have been there where there may not be any documentation previously. And so while we were doing some wider research there, we identified that there was quite a lot of graffiti, which may be sort of derived from the occupation period. It may predate that, or it may have been placed there afterwards. But the key thing was around how do we actually use that information to potentially identify those that were there. And so I can't say an awful lot about it at the moment because we've written a publication on it, which will hopefully appear in due course. But we were able to use some of the databases and identify some of the individuals who we believe were there at the time of the occupation. Although I'm not one would consider sort of a gun nut or anything like that, and I'm not necessarily about the history of firearms and those kind of things. Obviously, anywhere where individuals are killed and shot is a field where sort of my expertise may be of use and of benefit. And so I am absolutely interested in learning about the history of sort of not only of Britain, but also of Europe, etc., and how the Holocaust played a part for the survivors, for the victims, and those who are within the Nazi period. It also has a personal impact as well, because my ancestors were Jews, they lived in Austria, and I know that some of them were deported from Austria and then were killed just outside of Riga in Latvia. So sort of the Holocaust has a much sort of broader and personal meaning for me as well, and therefore sort of supporting the research in in that context, sort of outside of my firearms and ballistics expertise, is also uncovering some interesting sort of facts and insights into my background and where I came from. The Staffordshire Forensic Partnership is a formal agreement and partnership between Staffordshire Police and Staffordshire University, so in particular our department. There are a variety of different work streams, one of which is around forensic intelligence and knowledge. And what this means is that we are trying to develop initiatives or develop projects that enable information to be shared between police forces and with universities. So a lot of the times, academic and industry-led platforms, their systems don't communicate with each other. They're not allowed to share information between each other. But there's a lot of really vital, really important information that is stemmed from research, from publications, etc., where practitioners don't get access to that information. And therefore, we're trying to sort of build those links and make sure that that information, and in terms of good practice or latest innovation in the field, is shared with police forces. But also police forces are sharing that information that's not necessarily case sensitive, but any problems or any issues, anything that they are finding it hard to deal with, that maybe they don't have the time, the capacity to undertake themselves as practitioners, but we might be able to support them in doing that and providing those opportunities to them. So it's really a partnership with mutual benefit and really strengthening the knowledge information that's going on between those different areas. To me, the term open science isn't just about science, and it's not just about being open in the sense that everybody can access every piece of information. So to me, open science is about providing research, so not just one would consider hardcore science research, including social science, humanities, law, whatever that research field is, and making the information as openly accessible as possible. So what this means is maybe some bits of our research, maybe the outputs, maybe the recommendations or the findings of what we've done, we can talk to people or we could tell people what they are. Alternatively, it might mean getting all the information, all the data that we collected from individuals or from our sample or our subjects or whoever was involved in the research. It might mean about making all of that data available to everybody. Or it might mean just providing some bits of that data to certain people so that they can use it, access it, reproduce the research and see if they generate the same results or the same findings or completely different ones because their sample group was different. So open science to me means making research accessible and reproducible and open to those who will find it of use and of benefit. I think as a researcher, and especially in an area that maybe you're not an expert in, providing open data or open research outputs is really beneficial because it means that if you've undertaken a study and you can then see whether somebody else has the same findings or has slightly different findings. But not only that, you can try and understand why those findings might be similar or different. And therefore, if it's because the group of people were actually different, so for example, the group of firearms was different, how that then makes recommendations that can be interpreted or applied more holistically and not just only with this certain group of individuals or within this certain group of firearms. Within the Forensic Intelligence and Knowledge Bank workstream, part of the Staffordshire Forensic Partnership and the reason that actually our department won the Higher Education Academy's Collaborative Award for Teaching Excellence was because our research and the work that we do within the partnership is stemmed around our students. So everything that the partnership does involves students at some point in that process. So it might be that the students have the opportunity to sort of come through and work within the police force, within a particular department, and see how they work, sort of shadowing that work. Or it might be that through a 6-week placement, students have pitched an idea, or they target a research project that aims to help that police force or a particular unit within the police force actually solve a problem. And so it allows those students to network and to gain real world experience and undertake research that has real world application. And so at the end of that 6-week placement, for example, that project or that output will be then utilised or expanded upon within Staffordshire Police. And so the benefit to the students is therefore massive. But it also means, so that might be on a more small scale basis in terms of the number of students, but the partnership also allows students to have guest lecturers come in, for example, or supervisors to supervise the research that they do at the university. So not just about the students going and working at police headquarters. For research data management, I think there's a lot of challenges. And I say that because even though I'm an associate professor, I've had no real CPD or training with how to manage my research data. I've thought about it logically, or I've implemented it in a way that I can manage, but that's not necessarily appropriate or relevant to the context of the university maybe managing my research data, or using resources that are university-led that manage data appropriately, that preserve data appropriately. And therefore, everybody in lots of universities are managing data in a silo or in a very, very small research group. And actually, if we were to leave, where does that data go? Where does it get retained? Who preserves it? Who is it shared with? And that is a big challenge, but something that people are generally not thinking about at the moment, but really should be thinking about. Being part of the Research Data Shared Service has really got me thinking about actually how I manage my data and which sources or which facilities do I use to actually preserve my data. So, for example, when working with students, I've started using sort of OneNote systems. So it becomes like a shared electronic lab book. And although maybe it's not a true lab book in the sense of not all the raw data is stored there, but I have a really good and structured setup that where I can access the right information and the right methods and the right key findings for a particular research project that we're working on together. But yes, at the moment, when it comes to research data management, it's very much individually led, at least within our institution. But I'm very much hoping that that can be sort of expanded and that universities will start to take on that role, that responsibility much more, because without it, I'm relatively lucky in that at the moment my data sets are not very big, but I can't be funding my own cloud storage system just to populate my research data, and likewise with my colleagues. So hopefully that research data management training and the facilities that are provided will be sort of enhanced and much more accessible in the long term. When it comes to open science, if you haven't managed and structured your data in a way that other people can search, other people can find, and other people can understand in terms of what your research data is or what it means that they can't then use it or expand upon it in their context, or they can't compare their data to your data in order to understand those similarities and those differences. And therefore, I think we, as individuals, we don't necessarily at the moment understand how much time that takes to make your data clear and relevant and accessible to others. I currently wouldn't consider myself a user of big data, but I think the value of big data is immense, not only from an academic perspective, but also from a student perspective. So if I think about learner analytics, so being a student and knowing that my institution has access to how often I've entered the library, how long I was there for, whether I attended class or not, how much I interact with my virtual learning environment, such as Blackboard, and being able to analyse this information and then say to me, look, did you know that you're only accessing resources at these certain times of the day? Whereas actually you're coming into campus at this time of the day, and maybe because of this, you're not being as effective or as productive, or if you changed the way in which you do things, maybe you would become more productive or more effective and be less stressed. And that would have a big improvement in your marks or your mental health or your availability to socialize and interact with your other students, things like that. I think that when we see things visually, we are much more able to acknowledge what impact that's having on us. So, for example, I've developed for my department a series of dashboards so that we can actually use these dashboards as an interactive tool so that students can visualize how their attendance might be impacting on their grades, or to show how their grades differ or are similar across different modules. And we can use that as personal tutors to try and encourage those conversations, to try and find out more about our students as to maybe why it is that they did really, really well in this particular subject or this module, whereas in another module they found that really challenging, or and try and find out the skills or the things that they thought where they were able to succeed with, and then how they might be able to apply those in more challenging subject areas and try and improve their grades that way. So although it's not big data, learner analytics is big data, and the potential for using big data, not only in an institutional setting, but also in a research setting, I think has much more impact long term in terms of our understanding of a particular discipline, of how people do things, processes that are used, and how effective they are, and how that can be advanced for the future. So if someone was to be looking to be me, how would I advise them to actually do that? I think for me, it was about knowing what I wanted. And even though my path changed, not being scared to pursue that change, to do something and study something that I was passionate about, that was interested in, not just doing something that my teachers told me that I should do. Because without the passion, the drive, the motivation, the enthusiasm, I don't think I'd been able to be as successful as I've been. I also had to learn to challenge myself and to make sure that if there was an opportunity, I wasn't too scared to go for it. And that if you look for those opportunities, you'll get so many more opportunities as a result of that. And I would also suggest, like when I was going through education, social media didn't exist. But from a professional's perspective, the use of social media has been really important. I was not really into social media, but from a professional level, I was converted, and I've been asked to do things that I never would have done or had the opportunity to do because I was sharing what I was doing with people. So people knew what I was doing and therefore asked me to do things. Also, networking, meeting people, learning new information and new practices, not only locally but internationally through use of social media. The opportunities that if social media had been around when I was sort of going through university initially, I think that may have completely changed what I wanted to do. Not necessarily in a field perspective. You know, I would always want to do forensic science. I'd wanted to do forensic science since before CSI ever existed as a television program. It was just that passion, that desire not to follow the norm and do things that I knew I wanted to do. And so, I've met people, travelled internationally, all because of promoting, not marketing what I do, but just letting people know and letting the public know, letting other colleagues, other institutions know what I'm doing. Because I definitely think that, everything should be about working together, not competing against each other. And, open science is a mechanism to do that. The research data shared service is a mechanism to do that. And all these new opportunities to increase engagement, to increase collaboration are absolutely pivotal, I think, to moving forward. So although I've got obviously loads of different research projects, all in relevant areas of firearms and ballistics, one of the key things that I'm passionate and really motivated in doing at the moment is setting up a new international open access repository. It's called Research for Justice. There's a whole area of research that never gets published for a lot of different reasons. So ultimately, journals will publish research that has massively significant findings or based on sometimes quite large data sets, or it might just be that the level of competition in publishing in those journals is really high, and therefore lots of research worthy of publishing, maybe it doesn't get written up, or academics don't have time to write it all up. And so bits and pieces get published. But practitioners in the criminal justice system, for example, and justice systems internationally, don't necessarily have access to those published findings. But not only that, in academia, research is undertaken by undergraduate students, postgraduate students, and these are short-term projects. It might be undertaken by placement students. So, for example, with the Staffordshire Forensic Partnership, just over 6 weeks. So the scope of the research isn't necessarily extensive, but it's an amazing pilot study. It's something that hasn't been previously researched. It's not been previously published, and it might spark further research into the field. And these reports, these presentations or posters or theses, they don't get outside of the host institution, the university. Practitioners never see them, whereas they might actually provide some really vital findings, some innovative outcomes, some recommendations in practice, and these would be absolutely vital. And so Research for Justice is about harnessing that unseen work and making it accessible, and importantly, making it accessible to those practitioners who need it, who are working in justice systems. And this will allow us to showcase students' research, but also it will provide us with an idea as to who, not only in the UK, but internationally, is working on similar research projects, hoping to allow them to network with each other, make links, collaborations, and hopefully provide bigger data sets. So they might generate a research method that they can apply in lots of different countries or lots of different areas on lots of different types of sample, and actually then create data sets that are big enough to publish with and or compare findings across borders. The key thing as well is that it's interdisciplinary. So it's not just forensic science research being presented to forensic practitioners or forensic psychologists presenting their work in a psychology-related journal. The key thing is around having a central resource for all relevant disciplines, that the outcomes of that research might be beneficial to a justice system. So it might be beneficial to barristers, the judge, the jury, i.e. members of the public, might be relevant to policymakers, whoever it is who can access the information that's there and use it for good. Or it might be that research, in theory, is going to work, but actually, in practice, it doesn't. And explain why it doesn't. And again, those kinds of research findings won't really become published because they're not positive outcomes, they're not positive findings, but people might be doing that same research project all over the world, coming up with the same idea, the same answer, and maybe wasting time investigating things that other people have found haven't been successful. So the Research for Justice repository is my key sort of area at the moment that I'm looking to populate. And I've got academics and institutions on board from a lot of the prestigious universities, for example, University College London, King's College, Strathclyde University, etc., all feeding into populating this repository, which we hope to launch later in the summer, which is a pilot study for the JISC RDSS project. But then, just trying to get as many international as well as sort of European and UK institutions on board to really populate the repository and really investigate the impact of what this type of research, how that might help practice. If you want to find out more information about the Research for Justice repository, Dr. Helen Cara was an independent researcher who was supporting the development of the repository and has put together a report on her blog disseminating the findings at the moment. In terms of keeping up to date with the latest repository developments, and as soon as we go live and we launch formally, we'll put up the website link, the domain name, how to access the repository or how to deposit information in there. We've got a Twitter account, so that's @Res4Just, or just search Research for Justice. So that's research number 4, Justice. Or you can follow myself as well. I'm @Dr. Rachel BK. Staffordshire University also have a blog for the school. So we are the School of Law, Policing and Forensics. And we're the Criminal Justice and Forensic Science Department, if anyone's interested in learning more about what the department do and what the school do more holistically.
Thank you very much for listening to What the Edtech. Please subscribe for more episodes from the series, and you can also follow us on Twitter @JISC or visit us at jisc.ac.uk/podcasts, where you can access the show notes and listen to the whole series so far. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share, and don't forget to send us your comments.